Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Tourism and Hospitality Service Management, SOTHSM. Bachelor of Arts, Tourism Studies, BTS, English. Elective courses, EHI 01 Modern India 1857 to 1964. Block 1 Imperialism, Colonialism and Nationalism. Unit 6 Consolidation of the Raj. Frontier and Foreign Policy. 6.0 Objectives. The policy adopted by the British to consolidate their rule in India included the establishment of a proper administrative system as well as securing the boundaries of the newly conquered territories. The latter aspect is called the foreign and frontier policy, and it is often referred to as an imperialistic policy because it was formulated to serve worldwide British imperial interests. This unit tries to analyze the basic components of Indian foreign policy. After reading this unit you will know what the international situation was during the period of our study. Know how the British established their supremacy in the subcontinent. Understand how they tried to overcome the Russian danger in Central Asia. Learn what methods the British Indian government adopted to bring the Northwest under their control. Grasp the nature of British-Indian relations with Tibet, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and come to know about Indian policy regarding Perizar and Persian Gulf as well as Northeast Frontier Agency. 6.1 Introduction. By 1818 the British had conquered almost the whole of India except Punjab and Sindh, and their annexation too was only a question of time. After completing the empire building process, the British followed a twofold policy for the consolidation of the Raj. Namely, the introduction of a suitable administrative system and making arrangements for ensuring security of the newly conquered territories. The latter effort constitutes the frontier and foreign policy. This, of course, excludes British relations with Indian states, which were also regulated by the Foreign Department. The policy of defending British Indian territories is often described as an imperialistic policy, for it was formulated in the perspective of worldwide British imperial interests. Here we are posed with a pertinent question: can we say that India before 1947 had an independent foreign policy of her own? To a certain extent it was so. We have the following arguments in support of this point. The invasions of Afghanistan and Persia, Iran, and the plundering expeditions of the frontier tribes which had been going on for a long time ended with the consolidation of British rule in India. Being a big and strong component of the empire, India always had some weight in the formulation of British foreign policy. Because of distance between India and England, the British government of India always had some discretion and a certain degree of initiative in the formulation of foreign policy of India. Moreover, the British imperial interest in some spheres coincided with those of India, such as those involving Russia, Persia and China, which gave a fill-up to the evolution of India's foreign policy. In spite of these arguments, we must remember that India was a colony. The foreign political activities of the colonial government can be termed as India's foreign policy. But these were directed towards the larger interests of British imperialism. Here we may also draw your attention to the problem of suggesting the period or a specific year said to be the starting point of India's foreign policy. It is generally believed that the British East India Company began to evolve its foreign policy by establishing relations with the Indian states. These states were compelled to surrender their foreign relations to be controlled by the paramount British power. The other starting point is 1818, which inaugurated an era of consolidation of the Raj by the company. But in terms of international law, it was the transfer of power in 1858 to 59 from the company to the British Crown that gave to India's foreign policy an independent character, in form, but not in reality. 6.2 International situation. When we scan the world situation during the period of our study, we find it favorable to the British. As far as the sea coast and naval defenses were concerned, Britain, having defeated the Dutch, the French and earlier the Portuguese, was in a strong position. In the context of the defense of land frontier, the Russian and the Chinese affairs figured prominently in the diplomatic and military concerns of India during the whole of the 19th century. For proper understanding, it is necessary to explain the situation by dividing the subject matter into three sections. 6.2.1 British supremacy in the subcontinent. After defeating the Portuguese and the Dutch in the early stages of British conquest of India, the British and the French were involved in a worldwide conflict for domination. From 1740 to 1800, the conflict between these two powers was primarily confined to South India. The French, though defeated in the 7 Years' War, became a serious Threat to the British Empire in India with the rise of Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan, in Mysore and of Napoleon in France. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign and the consequent Battle of Nile, 1798, and the French relations with Tipu Sultan threatened the British in India. With the defeat of Napoleon in Egypt in 1788 and of Tipu Sultan in India, the French menace disappeared altogether in the south. After 1807, the scene of conflict shifted to northwest. After the French defeat in the naval encounters, Napoleon planned his strategy to attack India via land route. The apprehension of joint operation of the French and the Persians in collaboration with the Russians alarmed the British government in India and compelled Lord Minto, then Governor-General, immediately to send 4 diplomatic missions as a counter-move to avert the impending threat. Malcolm was sent to Tehran, Elphinstone to Kabul, Seaton to Sindh and Charles Metcalfe to Lahore. As a result of the efforts of these diplomatic missions, friendly treaties were concluded with the respective governments with a view to meeting the challenge of the French. These were the earliest steps taken up by the British Indian government in evolving India's foreign policy. Although the French threat disappeared with the defeat of Napoleon, but it left a trail for the Russians to follow. It may, however, be noted that the Portuguese small-scale presence in Goa, and that of the French in Pondicherry, never posed any threat to the British in the 19th century. However, by the closing decades of the century, the French tried to establish a consulate in Burma to encourage insurgency. Similar fears were entertained when the French made efforts to establish a naval base at Oman. And the Germans envisaged the construction of the Berlin-Baghdad railway line. 6.2.2 The decline of China. Despite cultural contacts and regular visits of the Chinese travelers, India never apprehended aggression from China. This was because the two countries were separated by the high Himalayan ranges, acting as a barrier between the two countries. Although China extended its sovereignty over Tibet in the 18th century and established supremacy over eastern parts of Central Asia, the situation for India did not materially change. In the 19th century, the Chinese power and prestige rapidly declined. This was a period when many European powers were trying to open up China for trade. The attention of Chinese was drawn towards resisting these powers rather than over its northeastern borders. 6.2.3 The threat from Russia. The idea of Russian peril was propagated by Lord Palmerston, British Foreign Secretary, in the mid-19th century, and the term first time mentioned by William Bentinck, the Indian Governor-General, was believed to reflect a real danger. Checked. By the British in Mediterranean Sea, the Russians rapidly advanced towards the northwestern frontier of Afghanistan. The British in India had not reached the natural one frontier, as both Punjab and Sindh were was favorably inclined towards Russia. It appeared as though the Russians were determined to control the whole of Near and Middle East, now known as West Asia. And this was seen as posing a threat to Afghanistan. 6.2.4 Afghanistan. The British were anxious to protect Afghanistan, the emporium of their trade, and the only entrance to Central Asia from their side. A stage was thus set for the Central Asian duel between the two expanding empires. Persia's siege of Herat and the unhappiness of Dost Muhammad, the Amir of Kabul, with the British policy-makers combined with the over-anxiety of the British Indian administration led to the First Afghan War, 1838-42, which proved to be a great disaster for the British. One of its significant consequences was the annexation of Sindh, 1843, and Punjab, 1849, which made the frontier of British Indian Empire coterminous with that of Afghanistan. The disaster in the First Afghan War led to the return of Dost Muhammad on the throne of Kabul. To the distinct advantage of England, he maintained absolute neutrality when England was fighting against Russia in the Crimean War, 1854-56, or was facing in India the revolt of 1857. Soon after the Crimean War, the Russians advanced swiftly in Central Asia, making the Russian intention clear. Prince Gorbachev wrote in his memorandum of 1864 that in approaching Afghanistan, Russia was influenced by the same imperious law that had led the British armies across the plains of Hindustan and Punjab till they reached the mountains. In pursuance of this aim, Russia extended its frontier by 1864 to Bokhara, to Samarkand in 1868 and to Khiva in 1873. In 1867, a new province of Russian Turkestan was formed and reduced Bukhara to the position of a vassal state. In 1873, Khiva fell to their control. In defense of their policy, Russians argued that British could always pose a threat to them through continental alliances, as had happened in the Crimean War. It was for this reason, the Russians argued that they had secured a strong military position in Central Asia to keep England in check by the threat of intervention in India. The British reaction to this Russian posture was twofold. One move was to occupy advanced stations in Central Asia and to secure commanding influence in Afghanistan. This came to be known as forward policy, which was generally held by the members of the Conservative Party. The other move, known as the policy of masterly inactivity or stationary school, generally supported by the Liberals, aimed at reaching a diplomatic understanding with Russia and adopting the policy of watchful non-intervention as far as Afghanistan was concerned. In the case of Russian attack, the government of India, under this second policy during 1863–75, preferred to meet the danger on the Indian frontier itself, since it was dangerous to strive for political domination over Afghanistan. Moreover, the Russian military base being far away from the expected scene of conflict, it was better to engage the Indian frontier. Opposed to this line of thinking were the protagonists of forward policy, who believed that the imminent threat of Russian invasion should be met beyond the Indo-Afghan frontier to avoid dangerous repercussions on the disaffected Indian people. It implied that the British Indian government should go forward to establish their control over Afghanistan and check the Russian advance on the Hindu Kush frontier. 6.2.5 Second Afghan War. In 1874, the Gladstone ministry fell due to the defeat of the Liberal Party at the polls. The new ministry was headed by the Conservatives. Disraeli firmly believed in the forward policy and gradually forced the Indian government to the Second Afghan War. The results of this war were not strikingly different from those of the First Afghan War. While on the other side of the Hindu Kush, the Russian imperial expansion continued unabated, their occupation of Merv caused tremendous nervousness in Calcutta and London. A year later they extended control over Punjab, and in 1893 they overtook Pamir Plateau, which bordered directly on Kashmir. By 1890 the European diplomatic scene began to experience restructuring of relations. Germany, after the fall of Bismarck, alienated Russia, forcing a bipolarization of powers. In this process the old enemies of England, France and Russia came closer to each other, leading finally to the formation of Triple Entente in 1907. Thus they resolved their political differences relating to their conflicting interests in different continents. 6.3 Northwest Frontier Policy. The annexation of Sindh and Punjab brought the British into direct contact with the hill tribes. It was an undefined border beyond which lay the tangle of great hills, cut by deep, winding valleys. The northern part, inhabited by the Pathans, was administered by the Punjab province, while the southern part, occupied by the Baluchis, known as the Sindh frontier, was then under Bombay. The hill tribes, however, were practically free, owing only nominal allegiance to the Amir of Kabul, inhabiting dry and difficult terrain, living on meager resources but endowed with courage, endurance and military skill. These people frequently indulged in mass raids and plundering of the British Indian border areas. These turbulent tribes created a turmoil that seemed to defy all chances of a stable and peaceful frontier, which was essential for the defense of India. Since the Northwest Frontier was under two different provincial governments, namely Punjab and Bombay, there developed two distinct methods of administering the frontier and conducting relations with the tribes. On the Sindh frontier, where the valleys were broader and less tortuous than in the Punjab, and where the cultivated land was not very close to the tribal areas, the closed frontier system was adopted. Under this system, the frontier was patrolled, and no tribesman from beyond the border was allowed to enter British territory without a pass. The Punjab frontier, on the other hand, was kept an open frontier. For its protection, forts and garrisons were built to guard the narrow passes. To encourage tribesmen to forsake their old habits of plunder, the government allowed them to trade in the British Indian territory. During the early it was Lord Dalhousie's policy which served as a grand strategy to keep the frontier under control. His policy can be explained in three words, namely fines, blockades and expeditions. Fines were imposed as a punishment for plunder and murder, blockades for keeping crises within certain limits, and expeditions were led against the tribes which resorted to mass plunder and rampage. The policy of sending punitive expeditions and blockades was described as butcher and bolt policy, and was criticized as a barbarous style of reprisal. Between 1849 and 1893 as many as 42 such expeditions were carried, in which as many as 2,173 British casualties took place. In View of the high rate of casualties, the British officers were discouraged from visiting The tribal region. To strengthen their control and conciliate the local people, The government encouraged the holding of fairs to promote internal trade. It also made provision for free medical treatment by opening dispensaries and hospitals. It created employment opportunities and encouraged the tribals to enlist themselves in military and paramilitary forces. It strengthened its hold on the region by constructing roads and railway lines. Lastly, the government organized the frontier districts of Hazara, Peshawar, Kohat, Bannu, Dera Ismail Khan and Dera Ghazi Khan. These were the efforts made to consolidate the frontier as the first line of defense of India. A comparative study of the two systems, Punjab and Sindh, reveals that the latter achieved greater success at least up to the year 1890, not because of innate superiority of the system but because of physical differences of the two frontiers which have already been mentioned. There were other factors as well. The Jirga, or the tribal council of The Pathans, was a large group consisting almost of the whole tribe. In Baluchistan there were only a few leaders and it was easy to deal with them. Agreements with the Pathan chiefs, on the other hand, did not possess the value which those arrived at with The Baluch chiefs carried. Another feature that proved effective was the appointment of Major Sandaman as an agent in Baluchistan in February 1877. His policy of friendly and conciliatory intervention was a great success for the British. All attempts of application of Sandaman's methods to the Pathan tribes, however, completely failed, because the leaders here did not possess a comparably high degree of influence over the fellow tribesmen. The Durand Line, 1893, till the establishment of peace on the northwest frontier was a complex problem as usually. The Amir of Kabul intrigued with the frontier tribes. On Lord Lansdowne's insistence, Sir Mortimer Durand was appointed to negotiate a boundary agreement with the Amir of Kabul, settling forever the responsibility of the Kabul government concerning the tribes on the Indus border. The agreement concluded on the 12th of November 1893 was as follows. I, the Amir of Kabul, was to retain Wakhan, Asmar, Kafiristan, Moma and a portion of Waziristan. The British were allowed to retain Swat, Bajor, Darwaz Kurrum Valley, Chalge, and New Chaman. The tribal areas of Gomal Pass were also given to the British. This divided the tribal area between Afghans and the British. It was also decided that a commission would be appointed to demarcate the frontier. The agreement, sent as followed by a survey and demarcation of the border. The work under the supervision of Mortimer Durand took 2 years as the suspicious tribal people hindered the work of demarcation. However, after the completion of the line of demarcation known as the Durand Line, the frontier was clearly divided for the purposes of responsibility for maintaining law and order from Tagdambash on the northwest corner of Hindu Kush to Mandar Pass, separating Kafiristan up Kabul. The Durand Agreement gave the legal right to the British government to enforce subordination upon the tribes like the Waziris, Afridis, and Bajoris. Suspicious as the tribes were, the immediate consequence of the agreement was their frequent revolt against the British. This was used by the British to lead armed campaigns into the frontier. This agreement proved helpful to the British for developing communications in the region, for collection of taxes, particularly salt tax, and interfering in their customs. Their Amir was unhappy over the loss of his suzerain rights over these tribes. Having intimate and personal knowledge of the area and the people, Lord Curzon, the Governor-General, 1899 to 1905, proposed the withdrawal of British Indian regular troops and replacing them with bodies of tribal levies. Besides gaining confidence of the frontier and creating local responsibility for maintaining law and order, the proposed change had the additional advantage of being less costly. He also held a darbar at Lahore on the 26th of April 1902 to conciliate the chiefs of frontier tribes. Further, for administrative efficiency and effective control, he carved out a new province known as Northwestern Frontier Province. Thus Lord Curzon could establish protracted peace. 6.4 Persia and the Persian Gulf. The region consisting of Persia, the coast of Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf was strategically very important to the British as it contained the approach routes through land and sea to India. On the land route, the British tried to check the invaders at various points of time. First the French forces, then the Russian. The British foiled the Persian attempt to occupy Herat. After 2 Afghan wars, Persia by the Treaty of 1907 was divided into British and Russian zones. While efforts were being made to check the increasing German influence in the region, revolution broke out in Russia in 1917. which gave the British an opportunity to occupy the whole of Persia. In 1921, the coup d'etat of Reza Khan restored Persia's independence. To defend itself against the intervention of the big powers, Persia entered into a pact with neighboring countries like Turkey, Iraq and Afghanistan, known as the Eastern Pact. Nevertheless, the region has remained a lure for the superpowers, leading to incessant war among the regional states up to the present day. On the sea route, particularly around the Persian Gulf, the British consolidated their position by establishing control over strategic sea and coastal areas. These areas were either annexed to British Empire or were bound to it by treaty relations. Significant among such places were Mauritius, Zanzibar, Muscat, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman etc. Lord Lansdowne was the first Viceroy of India, 1884–94, who visited the Persian Gulf, and about a decade later, i.e. in 1903, Lord Curzon assembled the Sheikhs of the Gulf aboard his flagship and proclaimed British supremacy over the region. In line with this policy, the British government forced the coastal states like Oman and Kuwait not to offer facilities to her European rivals like France and Germany. After the opening of the Suez Canal, this route became a lifeline for the British trade, and through treaties with coastal states the British trade was protected. Moreover, when oil was struck in the region, the British were the first to set up their control over oil industry and trade. 6.5 Tibet. The Himalayan ranges form a natural frontier between India and China. These high peaks sheltered many principalities like Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim and Tibet. Among these, Tibet is the most significant for the protection of India's frontier. Known as the Hermit Kingdom, Tibet is a landlocked country encircled by a chain of mountains with average height of 10,000 feet above the sea level. With meager economic resources, its people loved isolation and used the Chinese protection granted in 1728 as a means to ward off foreign dangers. The Chinese suzerainty over Tibet was nominal, and in practice it was never recognized in the 19th century. Having no threat from Tibet, a state which had given up warlike activities, and China being militarily weak, the British interest in Tibet, the backyard of China, was purely commercial to begin with. Warren Hastings showed keen commercial interest in the region and sent two missions, one in 1774 and another in 1783. But the isolationist and suspicious Dalai Lama, the ruler, declined the offer of establishing trade relations with the British East India Company. Inevitably but gradually the British interest in Tibet increased. Among many factors accountable for this increase in interest, we may mention the following as the most significant ones. In view of the declining power of China, and scramble among the foreign powers to divide it into spheres of influence, Tibet assumed great strategic importance, particularly for the British and the Russians. After the extension of British influence over Nepal, Bhutan and Sikkim, the boundaries of British India and Tibet came very close to each other. When the Russian advance reached Pamirs, it posed a threat to the security of India. From the northern side, lastly, during the 19th century, British interest in tea and shawl wool considerably increased. There was a tremendous pressure of the traders on the government to develop regular traffic with Tibet through Bhutan. With the palpable decline of the Manchu dynasty, the Chinese influence in Tibet was weakened. When the young Dalai Lama became independent of Regency Council, he became anxious to liberate himself from the Chinese influence, which in reality was just nominal. But this was the impression which British, particularly Lord Curzon, formed. Rumors were rife that a Mongol of Russian nationality, named Akbar Dorchi, had gained the confidence of the Dalai Lama and was shutting between Lhasa and Petersburg. The lure of the closed land was too strong to resist, the fear of Russia was too great to be ignored, and the desire for trade was too powerful to overcome. For Curzon, these were incentives to action, particularly when he knew that the Tibetan had little more than prayer wheels with which to resist modern weapons. Comyn was determined to bring Tibet under the British control. Though the government in England was reluctant to sanction any interference in the Tibetan affairs, Curzon was however able to extract permission to send Colonel Francis Younghusband to Tibet. He started his march into Tibet through Sikkim, and reached Lhasa in August 1904. After the slaughter of 700 Tibetans, a treaty was imposed upon them which reduced Tibet to the status of a protectorate of the British. The treaty yielded some commercial concessions to the British, but the bogey of Russian danger soon became superfluous because Russia by 1907 treaty acknowledged the British predominance over Tibet. Even if it had not done so, the Russians could not afford to pay much attention to Tibet as they were involved in East Asia. In fact, the British expedition was governed by imperialistic designs. After the Chinese Revolution of 1911, Dalai Lama announced his independence, but the new government was determined to make Tibet its integral part. The British, instead of recognizing Tibet as an independent state, invited representatives of China and Tibet to a tripartite conference in Shimla in May 1913. It met on the 13th of October 1913 and finally in 1914 two agreements were concluded. By one of them, the British accepted China's suzerainty over Eastern Zone or the Inner Zone. The Outer Zone or the Western Zone was declared autonomous. By another treaty, it was decided to draw a boundary between Tibet and British India, which is named after the British delegate Henry McMahon. The boundary by his name was delineated. D-ATBDIAM 6.6 Nepal. Between the northwest frontier and Tibet, there was a chain of small principalities. With the expansion of British Empire in this region, these small principalities came into contact with the British. In the process, they were brought under their direct or indirect control to serve as outposts against Tibet or China. The first among them from the western side was the Hindu Gorkha Kingdom of Nepal. After securing the control of the valley of Kathmandu in 1768, the Gorkhas steadily encroached upon both east and west, and occupied Kumaon, Garhwal and the Shimal Hills. These areas were conceded to the British after the Gorkhas were defeated by the Treaty of Sagoli in 1816. After the treaty, the British used a great deal of tact and skill in their dealings with the rulers of Nepal. They treated Nepalese ruler as sovereign and addressed him as Your Majesty. It is important to note that the British did not depend solely on the high ranges of the Himalayas to provide India protection from the north. To them, the Kingdom of Nepal was a stable and secure buffer between India and Tibet or China. 2. TK Great satisfaction of the British, Nepal displayed no signs of entertaining any sentiments against the British. Relations between them were of peaceful coexistence and confidence. They were based, more or less, on the assumption that there existed an alliance between the two sides. The Nepalese on their part maintained perfect neutrality. During the revolt of 1857, while the British enlisted a large number of Gorkhas as mercenaries in their army, without any formal alliance treaty, the Nepalese government molded their foreign policy in accordance with the British interests. For example, it is important to note the fact that they did not allow any diplomatic mission other than that of the British into Nepal. 6.7 Sikkim. Between Nepal and Bhutan there is a small Himalayan state known as Sikkim. It had two passes leading to Tibet. One road through Kalimpong and Jelep Pass leads into the Chumbi Valley and the other upward along the Tista River to Kampas Song and Shagatsa. One and the period before the Chinese domination over Tibet, Sikkim was politically and strategically significant because through it Tibet could be approached. Civilized by the Tibetan monks and ruled by its aristocratic family, Sikkim was an independent country. By the closing decades of the 18th century, the Gorkhas temporarily established their control over it. The British, however, restored its independence, and in 1861 declared it their protectorate, much against the wishes of Dalai Lama. The British right over Sikkim was recognized by the Chinese government. In 1890, here too, the British had acted to guard their own interests. 6.8 Bhutan. Adjacent to Sikkim on the eastern side is the state of Bhutan. Being poor, the Bhutanese frequently raided the plains for looting wealth. In one of such raids, the Bhutanese kidnapped the Raja of Cooch Behar, who was a British protectorate. To rescue him, Warren Hastings attacked Bhutan, and as a result of the Bhutanese defeat, a small strip of land was annexed to the British territories. The Bhutanese continued their raids on occasions when the British were busy elsewhere. They occasionally mistreated the British delegates. Annoyed with such activities on the border, the British unleashed the policy of repression and reprisal and established their authority so firmly that in the Younghusband expedition, 2904-6, the Bhutanese offered full support. Finally, through the efforts of Sir Charles Bell, a treaty of friendship was signed at Punakha which recognized the Bhutanese ruler as sovereign in all matters, except foreign relations, which were placed under the British control. 6.9 Northeastern FRONTIE Agency NEFA. The hill region between Bhutan and Burma was inhabited by the hill tribes, akin to their counterparts in the northwest in all qualities except race and religion. These tribes were practically independent. Exhibiting strong and warlike spirit, they raided the plains to mitigate their poverty. Their predatory attacks became a matter of great concern for the British administration, particularly after 1826 when Assam was incorporated into India. To pacify them, the Government of India adopted the policy of offering them gifts and guaranteed protection. When the British frontier reached the watershed of the mountain ranges, they established a chain of posts and made the Tibetan government control. They remained separate from the rest of India by inaccessible mountain ranges. The Nagas were Christianized by the Baptist missionaries and the upper strata of society was westernized. Manipur, another hill state, posed serious problems for the British. In 1826 its ruler was recognized as Maharaja by the British. After 1886, the death of one of the successors of Maharaja unleashed a chain of murders of British officials, forcing the British Indian government to declare it a protectorate. Burma, the eastern neighbor of India during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, was an expanding empire. After shaking off the Chinese supremacy, it started expanding its empire. Through conquest, it extended its frontier over Thailand on the east, and on the west over Manipur and Assam, and the Burmese encroachments led to three major wars with Burma, first in 1824-26, second in 1852 and last in 1885, which resulted in the conquest of the whole of Burma by the British. 6.10 Let us sum up. In the end, we should make an attempt to draw broad conclusions from the above description. 1. The British Indian foreign policy had been largely shaped by the fact that in Asia there were two great powers, namely, Russia and China, and their relations at a given time determined the political developments in India. During this period, China was a declining power. Russia, on the other hand, was expanding its frontier over Central Asia. In India, British power was rapidly advancing towards the northwest, in search of a natural frontier and to ensure the security of its empire. Evolving foreign policy, the Russian peril, was a factor to reckon with throughout 19th century. 2. India's geographical position was another determining factor in its foreign policy. India was surrounded by small states which in themselves were not a threat to India's security, but being militarily weak, they tempted foreign powers like Russia to attack them and consequently pose a danger to India. Moreover, India's frontier line was inhabited by warlike tribes who would threaten the peace of the frontier, thereby making it vulnerable and a weak line of defense. 3. Careful evaluation of the British policies in India clearly establishes that the British consolidated the Raj by organizing state administration and by taking deep interest in ensuring that India did not suffer any foreign invasion. And yet it has to be remembered that the entire foreign policy of the British in India was directed towards safeguarding the worldwide imperialist interests of Britain. We shall see in the further units how and why the nationalist leadership in India criticized this foreign policy. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.